This session is titled Learning Language as a Community. It's Zoom Room 3. So hopefully this is where you plan to be, but we're gonna get started right away for time. But ano ai me ke aloha ia o ko pakahiapau. Mai ka lā puka I ka hikina o ka ʻaina honu a hiki I kona ea ana mai I kumukahi I ka moku o ke ave. E pāhola ana I kona kukuna o ka lā ia nā poʻopoʻo. Ka pohulaʻi a o nā kona a ike ia o Maui nui a ka malala walu. Pāwalu ke aloha I ka uka o piʻi holo na ka makani ukiu e halihali ana I ke aloha ia haka o pua. Ai o ahu I nā pali hauliuli o nā koʻolau kahi e kuaola e kānaka. A mau aku no I ka mole olu o lehua. Aloha nui kākoa e nā lahui o iwi. Aloha and welcome to our session about learning language as a community outside of the classroom. We are very fortunate today to have two Pacific, specifically Hawaii organizations who are ANA grantees to share with you folks about how they teach and nurture language outside of the classroom. As we know, while the classroom is oftentimes the most common setting for native language learning, in order for our languages to thrive, they must live beyond the walls of the classroom. The function of today's session will consist of two 20-minute presentations and a short Q&A to follow. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll save them for the Q&A after. Please keep yourselves muted through the presentations and we're gonna get started. Our first presenter today is Keoua Nelson no nā poʻopoʻo mai ʻoia, nā poʻopoʻo South Kona, Hawaii Island. He is currently a kumu olelo Hawaii, a Hawaiian language teacher of the Kealiʻi method, and he's the lead educator for Project Ho'opoeko at Papahana Kuaola. Mahalo e Keoua, no keia manawa.
Mahalo and aloha, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here and get the presentation started. Just give me a minute. Aloha mai kākou. As Paige had mentioned, I currently practice or work at Papahana Kuaola. We are a land-based education center here on the east side of Oahu. As Paige had mentioned, o Keoua Nelson ko inoa mai nā poʻopoʻo kona mai au. He kumaʻao o lelo Hawaii mai ka makahiki 2009. I kia manawa ke poʻokumu ma Project Ho'opoeko ma Papahana Kuaola. So basically, I am the lead educator at Papahana Kuaola for a project called Project Ho'opoeko. Now, Ho'opoeko means to enable fluency in a language. And our focus here is to create a language immersion workplace where language learners can achieve fluency and utilize the languages in our communities and in the workplace. There's a desire to expand the use of Hawaiian language and normalize its fluency. Beyond the academic settings, once a student learns Hawaiian language, there's really no place in the community where they can continue their language experience. And so what we're trying to do is to establish and create these workplace environments for people to not only learn, but continue the use of their Olelo Hawaii. So our target audience are employees of Hawaiian-based education organizations in the Ko'olau area of the island of Oahu. And this goes from land preservation and cultivation to fish pond restoration and propagation, which also includes language immersion school employees as well. Now, the methodology that we use to teach Olelo Hawaii is called Kealelo Matua. It is based off of the Kealiʻi method, which is based off of the silent way that was created back in the late 60s, early 70s. And what this does is it allows students to pull from their personal experience in learning languages. We utilize manipulatives and hand gestures in instructing proper grammatical sentence structures, but it allows the student not to get hung up on understanding subject, verb, object. So all the little details of a sentence structure we kind of remove it with the use of these manipulatives. The one thing that we do and enforce is, or reinforce, is proper intonation, pronunciation, and enunciation. And so this is what a class would traditionally look like with the use of the manipulatives. And I'd like to go into a really quick demonstration. So here, just to preface, we start our classes with the very basics, understanding the words for different colors for objects, and then moving into knowing base type of sentence patterns without really using or understanding the English counterpart. So I'm just...
Ka'i'a polu.
Ka'i'a polu. Ka'i'a polu.
Ka'i'a mele mele.
Ka'i'a mele mele. Ka'i'a mele mele. Ka'i'a polu. Ka'i'a mele mele.
Kapua ula ula.
Kapua ula ula. Kapua ula ula.
Kapua alani.
Kapua alani. Kapua alani.
Okay. E hopu I kapua polu.
E hopu I kapua alani. E hopu I ka'i'a ula ula. E hopu I kapua poni.
And so once we go through the basics of actually learning how to create sentences using the manipulatives, we then apply it to workplace activities where the language learners or the participants can take those lessons and utilize it throughout their workday. For example, like
we're learning Hawaiian language over here. The
yeah,
bluefish,
and so they're able to apply. They're able to apply those lessons.
Spell it.
Oh yeah, it's right there.
It's all vowels.
Sorry, could I ask you to put your phone on mute?
Use my glasses to see it.
And yeah, so we can take those lessons learned with the manipulatives and assimilate into everyday work environment. Now, we can actually take that and then start to create full sentence patterns.
So using these rods, we can teach proper sentence structure in Olelo, Hawaii. Ua kanu kamahiai ike kalo inehine. The farmer planted the taro yesterday.
Ua huki kamahiai ike kalo inehine. The farmer harvested the taro yesterday. Ua ku'i kamahiai ike kalo inehine. The farmer pounded the kalo yesterday.
Maikai. And so that is a regular simple verb sentence structure. Now in Olelo, Hawaii, passive voice is very prevalent. Using the rods, we can also still turn this into a passive voice. Ua kanu kamahiai ike kalo inehine. Ua kanu ia ke kalo e kamahiai inehine.
Ua huki ia ke kalo E kamahiai inehine.
Maikai.
Ua ku'i ia ke
Keoua.
kalo e mahiai inehine.
Maikai. And that is a passive voice sentence structure. What's even more prevalent in Olelo, Hawaii is that the situation can sometimes take the most important. So we're going to say, yesterday, the farmer planted the taro. Inehine I hukiai kamahiai ike kalo. Yesterday, the farmer planted the taro.
Inehine I huki ia
I hukiai
o I huki ai e mahiai I ke kalo. Inehine I ku'i ai ka mahiai I ke kalo.
Maikai. And so from that, we actually went from an elementary sentence structure to more of an intermediate and advanced type of sentence structure using the rods.
So the color of the rods actually represent a particular parts of speech, which then removes the need or the requirement for the student to learn the different parts in order to construct this sentence. As you notice in one of the segments, the student actually had a difficult time creating the structure, but by following the color codec, she was able to put it into a proper technique. And so this technique actually welcomes mistakes being made so that the coach or the leader, the lead instructor, can actually calibrate them to the appropriate sentence pattern.
So using the
And so this matrix just kind of shows a brief description of what the rods would represent for the different tense patterns or the tenses of our sentence patterns. So currently we've had students in the program for about 2 years. And as a result, we've been able to utilize their experiences and the techniques or lessons learned to create what we call a mo'olelo. Here at Papahana Kuaola, we highlight a story or a mo'olelo the first Monday of every month. And then the students will actually contribute and participate in the creation of words, phrases, or proverbs that support that mo'olelo. And here we have, so it's totally student contributory and participation. All of the posters and their videos are done by the students. We have a website here. It's open for everyone or anyone to go ahead and access. So feel free to log in and register to see what we're doing here. So I kind of wanted to highlight some of the successes that we've had in the program. The language learners have been able to increase their language usage during the workday, and also with on-site education with students from immersion schools in the community while visiting the site to conduct either land-based education and things like that. So they've been able to utilize their lessons learned and actually make it applicable. We also host language community events where the language learners can also utilize their lessons, not just with their fellow students, with people in the community as well. So in this last event we highlighted or we learned how to do lauhala weaving, which is bandana sleep, and they actually made these covers for their water bottles. And so in the 2-day period, we were teaching them new vocabulary as long as reinforcing the lessons that they've learned in class. One of the other successes is our program sustainability. So we've been teaching or training alakai or coaches to perpetuate and sustain this project within their own organization. Since then, one of our partnering organizations has actually implemented on-site language program for their new hires. And here we see their students using a traditional Hawaiian measurement system that they've learned in class to measure the length of their bridge at their local fish pond. Now, there are some challenges that we are faced. This methodology is kind of a new methodology, and so locating or finding qualified instructors to teach this has been a challenge. And what we've done is we've video recorded the qualified instructor to be used as a tool to train additional instructors and for our students to go back and review lessons. We also relied on the individual instructors' experiences as teachers to provide lessons in accordance with the methodology. Now, of course, like everyone else, adjusting to the new COVID-19 environment, and as you've seen, we use manipulatives quite a lot in instruction. So we basically had to create scenarios for each student and send it to the student in order to support the lesson of the day, until we're able to provide kits for each student so that they could use that in class. And with the distribution of the kits, we were also trying to prevent any potential spread of viruses or illnesses. But when we were able to meet, we also purchased face shields for each student. And this was important because as part of the learning process, it is very important for us to be able to see each student's mouth so we can make sure that they're enunciating words correctly, as well as for proper pronunciation. Now, one of the unexpected outcomes as we've come into a new norm of the home being the workplace as well as the learning place, some of our language learners are actually engaging their household in what they've been learning and passing it on. Show a really quick video here.
Uli uli. This one.
What?
Ele ele.
Ele, ele.
You know this one?
Right. Ke'o.
Right. And then green is
Green is oma.
my ka'i. Ada.
Orange.
Alani.
Alani.
Yeah, so it's really nice to see that the students are now creating their own community of language speakers in their household, which also helps support our greater goal of supporting the greater community, the state, and their goals of increasing the normalization of Hawaiian language in our communities. And that's it for my presentation. Here's my contact information. If you would like more information about the methodology or would like to set up individual or private lessons, I would say, on using the methodology, please feel free to email me or contact me at this phone number. So thank you for joining me. Mahalo. And we'll look forward to hearing some of your questions at the end.
Mahalo nui, Keoua, mahalo. And welcome everybody. In case you missed our introduction, you feel free if you have any questions to type them in the chat box, and I will say the Q&A we'll be having after. But our next presenter, I'm very honored to introduce, is Kumuhula Kealiʻi Reichel. He is a lot of things, but today he is the Kumu and Cultural and Ceremonial Advisor for Hālau Keʻalaokamaile.
Aloha kako. Greetings to all of us. I hope that this Zoom meeting finds all of you in good health and safe during these crazy, unprecedented times. Mahalo to the powers that be, both seen and unseen, that brought us all here together today. Mahalo yaoi e Keoua for your amazing presentation. I'm gonna have to like plug into you over there on what you're doing and bring it into our space over here. I'm gonna share my screen and hopefully it works. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can, I'm assuming everybody can kind of see that. All right. Okay, I really had to think about this particular, our particular grant through ANA, because I really didn't think that it fit into a language summit, but in retrospect and in thinking about what we do and what our goals are, it certainly does in a very different kind of perhaps way. And so the name of our grant is Perpetuating Native Hawaiian Cultural Practices Through Native Plants. And before I get started on explaining a little bit about our project and how that affects language acquisition, I feel the need to start with a chant. Yeah, because everything for me is about environmental kinship and reconnectivity to those older energies, yeah, that help to guide us on our everyday paths. So e ulu tini o te atua ulua e kane me tana loa ulu ta ohi ala uta waita ie. Ulua e te tua no i tona e tahu e atawaila he vaiola. E ola ia ui te tumu, e ola i te poopua. E ola i ta pai pai, e ola i nā umanapa. Eli eli tapu, eli uonoa. Okay, got that out of my system. And I think I'm supposed to press play. There we go. But you can see, I'm not very good at this. Yeah, so e kala mai if I'm a little kanalua about this whole process. This particular chant is really hula related, but we take portions of the thought process of this chant to create new curriculum for those who are in our program. So I want to introduce the three main groups that are part of this process. Hokunui, who is the landowner, owns 256 acres, and they are a regenerative farming community. In the center here, you see Hālau Keʻalaokamaile. That's my baby. It's the nonprofit branch, the nonprofit partner. And then we have an amazing ohana, the Hewa Hewa ohana, who created their own kanuka ike, or planting knowledge. So between the three of us, we have created this particular program, perpetuating Native Hawaiian cultural practices through native plants. Part of our goal is to train Native Hawaiians to learn from multiple experts, yeah, to become proficient in the ceremonial planting, maintaining, harvesting, and processing. And I hate this word, but it is what it is. And marketing of plant materials in the following three disciplines. And we can talk about the marketing Bombay if we get time. So the first discipline is papalei. Yeah, and because we have a land base in which to create this curriculum, yeah, we found that we were able to expand upon their education, the cultural education. And so not just learn about the techniques of lei making, but also, what kinds of plants are proper, both traditional and non-traditional. What is the seasonality of said plants? What kinds of ceremonial or ritual protocols come with that particular practice. Yeah, so we were very lucky to bring in several lay teachers. Over here, we see Uncle Bill Char, who pre-COVID would fly in, yeah, and come and teach this particular class. And the second discipline is probably the most complex of them all. This is what we call the Papakapa class. And Lisa Schattenberg Raymond is the kumu for this particular discipline. And again, because we have a land base, we were able to plant vauke slips, Yeah. Now, the interesting thing with a lot of these disciplines is that it takes time. Yeah. We have to, the planting of vauke, from planting all the way to harvest, and that's not even processing, takes about 18 months. Yeah. So what do we do in the 18 months that we're waiting for the vauke to harvest? Well, we go into the forest. We contact other vauke planters, and they continue their work while they wait, and they cultivate their own vauke patches. Yeah, and so this is a multidisciplined discipline, because within this you have vauke or paper mulberry. You also have to know the different kinds of natural dye plants, how to cultivate them, yeah, and when and how to harvest them and process them to make dyes. And then you have to learn how to carve to make ohikapala or stamps. So this particular one is really, really intense, yeah, with different multi disciplines that combine into one. The third discipline is gourds, is ipu. Yeah, and again, this one is time consuming. It takes anywhere from 6 to 8 months from planting the seeds to cultivation, careful cultivation of the plants, and then waiting for them to dry, and then deciding what kind of project we are going to do. So in the meantime, as they were planting their plants, we purchased gourds from a gourd farm, and we had Mr. Kaleem Smith here show them how to make ipuheke, yeah, or hula drums, for those who don't know what they are. And then on top of that, because I am a kokopu'u person, kokopu'alu person, the usage of gourds as containers, as you see in the bottom picture here, is part of their learning process. So all of what they learn is within the context of their particular discipline. Each of these disciplines can be learned in many different places. The difference with us is that we decided to, it's very rare that you get to plant, cultivate, harvest on your own, and then create your art project. Yeah. On top of that, we decided to make it more meaningful to add ritual and ceremony and chant. And I'll get into that a little bit. And that's where the language component comes in for us. Yeah. So to give you a sense of place where we are, right over here, where you see that star, that's where we're located on the island of Maui. It's about 2,500 feet above sea level in the ahupua'a of Hamakua Poko. So our overarching mission is to empower Native Hawaiians with traditional Hawaiian knowledge. The passing of this knowledge is empowering to both teacher as well as student. Students help us to be informed over time how to become better and more efficient teachers. As a teacher, it's empowering that the knowledge that we've kept in ourselves will get shared and passed forward. Through ritual and ceremony and chanting, we tend to stretch the mind and reignite environmental connectivity, environmental kinship. Yeah, because once a mind is stretched, it's difficult to back to the shape it once was. Yeah. We try to cultivate focused practitioners and stewards of the land through their chosen discipline. Practitioner is an interesting word. I have a love-hate relationship with that word, but it is what it is. I can't find another one that's better for now. We focus them internally through ceremony, ritual, and protocols. Yeah. In doing so, we try to reignite the physical and spiritual and environmental kinship through basic to intermediate chant and protocol training. And so each of these disciplines have their own protocols. Each of these disciplines have their own ceremony and or ritual. And the ritual process is doing things over and over again. Yeah, repetition. for us, that ritual repetition creates ike that sinks deep into the bones, deep into the na'au. Yeah. So we have basic, intermediate, and chant protocol training every morning. All the classes, all 3 disciplines come together, and they have to basically ring the doorbell with chant. Yeah. And so they do a melekahea that's place specific for us. And within this particular melekahea, or calling out chant, it's not really asking permission. It's just saying, hey, I want to come in. Yeah, because we really don't have permission chants that we've been able to find. These are calling chants to let them in. And so you see clues in here about place, about environment, that they can see as they're chanting all around them. All of the place names here is within eyeshot of each other. And so not only are they learning how to properly enter a space through a melekahea, but they are also visualizing all of the things that they are chanting about. And that for us kind of sinks into the kino itself, into the na'au. Yeah. Let's see. And we consider the space that we gather up at Kapuao, up in Pi'iholo, as a halau. Yeah. And that halau is a physical space that, here affords us the ability to bring all our interconnected practices into one space. Yeah. Ha is breath, lau is many. And so this gathering of people who share the same goals, the aspirations, yeah. So all 3 disciplines come together and they learn protocol, chant, ceremony, they learn vocal technique, they learn the different kinds of growth chants, the different kinds of rain chants, all of those things that create connectivity to the environment around them. Not just planting the plant, but chanting to the soil, chanting to the cloud, chanting to the mountain, yeah, to call them into the space that we have up there. We also do, part of our curriculum is environmental observation methodology. So we call that kilo, yeah. Kilo means to observe and then to take note and remember, yeah. So when you are kiloing out into the environment, you identify seasonal and cyclical patterns. Oops, how do I go back? There. See changes in environmental patterns, observe abnormalities, and start to identify natural indicators. All of this is done with Hawaiian terminology, yeah? And so a lot of this takes some memorization from each of the students in their respective disciplines. Let's see, back, okay. Another thing that we have in our curriculum is kaulana mahina, moon phase terminology. Know your mahina, owai ka mahina I Kealiʻi. Who is the moon today? Not what is the moon, who is the moon today? That creates a bit of a better pilina because it's much more on a human level when you think about the moon itself, yeah, and all the things that the moon can give us. We are a moon people, really. And so knowing for each discipline, which moon is the best for your planting, which moon phase is the best for your harvesting, which moon phase is the best for pruning and cultivation. Because in each of these disciplines, each one has its own moon phase that's really, really good for that specific kind of plant. So these are the kinds of things that we encourage, and we try not to be too pushy about it. Yeah, we strongly encourage. Yeah. Recognizing seasons and cloud patterns. And again, terminology comes here. The different kinds of ao, the ilio ao, the manu, the nu'a, the pua'a, the ao mauna. Yeah. And what kinds of environmental indicators through these clouds is going to tell us what kind of weather is coming. Yeah, because as planters and cultivators, yeah, they have to know all of these things as best as possible. And again, through repetition, ritual, and ceremony, these things eventually get downloaded into the system. They learn the importance of place names, the winds and rain names, and their characteristics. In knowing these rains and when they come and how they come will affect their planting habits. Yeah, and also too, once you name something, you have a relationship with that thing. Yeah, and so that unto itself, knowing your different rains and winds and how to call them. Yeah, that's the key here too, that they learn how to call the wind. They learn how to call the wind and the rain. And you can't do that unless you know the name of the wind and the rain. Yeah. Through this program, they rediscover the cause and effect of ceremony and ritual. Yeah. For us, chant is a form of communication that's higher level than how I'm speaking to you now. Yeah. And there's power in that, and it's causative. Yeah, these chants affect the environment. These chants affect the soil, all of the microbes, all of those things. Yeah, because these are harmonics that come out of our mouth. Yeah, and this Aina, this Pai Aina, these islands and this universe, the ancient powers that be, they're accustomed to hearing that kind of harmonic come out of our waha. And so we harness that. Yeah, and they get to see firsthand how important that is, because we've had what you call that comparative studies already, where we chanted to one field and we never chant to the other field right next to it, and we had found within several months that the field that we chanted to with pule and with praise to the Aina grew twice as fast and twice as strong as the field that we never. That field that we didn't do anything to was aight. Yeah. And so they could see firsthand what their harmonics were doing. One of the challenges that we've had is that with these students, there are varying types and levels of practitioner. Some were really good at what they did, or they were already a practitioner of that discipline, but they lacked certain other things like language or ceremony. And then we have varying levels of language fluency. Within these students, you have those who are fluent in Olelo Hawaii, and then you have those that have absolutely no idea. A lot of them had varying levels of chanting experience. Some didn't know how to chant, some were halau trained, some weren't. And so we had to find a real good middle ground for all parties involved, all the students. And there are also varying levels of ceremonial experience within that group, within the group itself. And so how do we address that? Carefully. Yeah, we want to make sure that nobody feels left out. Yeah, that this is a collective and we all on the same canoe. And so if somebody is having a hard time in this canoe to move forward, yeah, to your destination, then it falls upon everybody on that canoe to pai, yeah, to kokua and kapo'o, that particular student. We create mentorships within the students themselves. And the caveat with that is that within that mentorship, we create new leaders. Yeah, we start to groom new leaders in that particular discipline. And so to end, we always remind each other, iola oi, iola ya'u. Yeah, when you thrive, I thrive. When you live, I live. I am dependent on you and you are dependent on me. And this goes between humans. This goes between the human and the environment. Yeah. And so these are the lessons that we try to imbue our students with. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo. So like I said before, if you folks have any questions, you can, we're gonna move into our question and answer time. There are 160 of us or so in the room, so I will try my best to facilitate, but there is one question that came into the chat earlier. if we could, Keoua, this question was for you while you folks figure out if you have a question. I believe it was Laura asked if there were English examples for the blocks.
I can actually provide one. So because we are focusing on the Hawaiian language, I created one just specifically for the Hawaiian, but I will create one and I can share that with you.
Okay, mahalo. Does anybody have a question? You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it. So many of us today. Okay, well, Christopher asked, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Amazing presentation on the earth and the environment with the chanting. With us here, it's with prayer. We do with prayer. I understand your chanting is probably like a prayer, but very awesome presentation. Thank you.
Oh, mahalo. Yeah, most of what the chants that they learn are actually prayer chants. Yeah. We liken them to, the chant that is in your mouth is like an arrow. Yeah. And then you pull that arrow, you lock it up. Yeah. And then you let it go. Once that comes out of your mouth, that pule comes to fruition when it hits its target and stuff. So it's been an interesting experience for those who are not accustomed to that kind of depth of harmonic. Yeah, but then you got to start someplace, right?
Mahalo.
In the beginning, you had mentioned that you didn't know how the language would tie in, but it ties in. All of it ties in, the language with the earth. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
guess I have to get myself out of the box oftentimes, because when I think of language, I think of a class. Yeah, and I think of the kind, and we don't. Our goal isn't fluency. Our goal is acquisition through work.
Right.
And stuff. So yeah.
And thank you. Very good.
Yeah, and just to echo what Kealiʻi had shared earlier, it's even with language classes, we have people of various proficiency levels. And like he mentioned, like we're in this canoe together. So it's really our kuleana, our responsibility to help shore up everyone else so that we can all reach our destination together. And so what he does, with the cultivation, the propagation, and all of that actually ties in beautifully with language. So awesome job.
I'm gonna cut in really, really quickly. There's a couple questions in the chat box. One came from Chris, and this can go for both of you, who asked, how closely do you folks work with other communities, so other islands, or other Hawaiian language groups in schools? We know how that tends to work, but if you two could explain how closely you work with other groups as well.
I'll go first. And so working with people in other islands, I've been asked and requested to share this methodology and actually working on other grant projects and taking this methodology to the other islands, and that'll happen next year. Unfortunately, it will have to be virtually with intermittent in-person classes. But when working with other language schools, this is just one tool and one methodology that works, and basically it's what works best for you is the greatest way to learn. Our focus with this methodology is what I would consider meant for the gap generation, and I'm sure this is the same for each of you. When our language was oppressed, our parents and grandparents were not allowed to speak. And so now we have children going to immersion schools that are learning, which now are not able to use it in the home because their parents don't speak, their grandparents don't speak. And so our goal and aim is to really hit what I call that gap generation, so that we can start to create, a community within the household that'll affect the greater community, and so on and so forth. And so or it's really just planting the seed and seeing the ripple effects. Where we integrate with other language schools is when they come on property here at Papahana, and we know these are students from immersion schools. It gives us the opportunity to really put it into practice while educating them on what our goal and mission here is at Papahana as a land-based education environment. And that's our interaction with people outside.
I'll agree with that because we kind of do the same thing over here. We've had multi-generational groups come. We've had Kula Kaiapuni come up and kokua us. We've had senior citizen centers come up and help us with our work up there. And at the same time, they learn a little bit of something and take back with them. Depending on the group that comes, we'll tailor it to that particular group. And that'll determine how deep we can go or how far we can go within the learning experience. So that, because, sometimes if you overfeed somebody, they cannot digest. Yeah. And so knowing what group you're talking to and knowing what to feed them will help them retain as much as possible without being overfed or underfed. Yeah.
Mahalo. So I made the mistake of saying, let's all unmute ourselves, but there's so many of us. If you can just type it in the chat box, I'm doing my best to get through all of them. One question was about the presentation. So ANA they're recording all the sessions and they'll be posted later, so you can find this presentation again after they've been posted. And I believe you'll be sent an email letting you know when they're up. One question came in for you, Kealiʻi. Are the songs composed by the students, and are there certain protocols used for hakumele? Do you have your students hakumele iloko kila papahana?
No. Mainly because hakumele is for me in my training is a very specialized skill that requires extra training, and so because the words have power. Yeah, we say ikaʻolelo no Keola, ikaʻolelo no kamake. Yeah, there is life in the word and there is death in the word. So choosing carefully. So some of these chants that we utilize are old. Yeah, they've been passed forward either from newspapers, Hawaiian language newspapers, or from publications or private writings. In some of these disciplines, we didn't find too much. And so we had to create a framework, a ritual ceremonial framework of new prayer chants based on what kinds of outcomes we want at the end of that particular session or at the end of the process. And so it's a mixture of all that kind of stuff. The most I've assigned for this is to take a look at an old chant with one of my students who is also a chanter, and to bring it to life, because we don't know how that chant goes. We don't know how that pulig went. Yeah, and so bringing that to life, finding a voice for that previously unknown prayer is important. But no, they're not ready to haku yet.
Mahalo kumu. And that's true. Like in Hawaiian language, Hawaiian culture, hakumele is a very, very high level discipline for a lot of us. Brian, I think I almost cut you off before I asked everybody to put it in the chat. Did you have a question before I cut you off?
No, well, I just, I like what Kealiʻi and just the whole presentation and the connection. I think he was saying to reignite and repeat and ritual and ceremony, physical and spiritual connection, to the land, to the hudadu, the land. And then he said the mountains. And then it's kind of I see that in some other tribes, like ours, acknowledge the land, the waters, the trees, and then how he was talking kind of the elements too, to the rain. And that really builds a deep connection when you're learning the language. Because I was told when you start to talk to the land and the elements, like we have the four powers, the wind, the clouds, the lightning, and the thunder. and then that creates the rain. So when you talk to them, start to use the language in communicating with them, you start to, it kind of visually starts to happen. And I really like that style of teaching, that philosophy concept, you know, that it's old. That's an old way in connecting with everything around us. So I really like what you guys are saying in the presentation. Aho, mahalo.
Mahalo, Brian. So there's a lot of questions. So I'm trying to speed through these in the last 10 minutes. But mahalo everybody for being so participatory outside of, I know the Zoom boxes are hard. There is a question about if you separate or keep religion and culture apart or together in your teachings.
No. No. For, you know, religion is a very personal thing. And when we had our introduction with our new students, we made it very clear that this is, we are going to reconnect you through old chant, through old practices, through ritual and through ceremony with the old deities. Yeah. And you have to be okay with that, no matter what kind of background you come from. Yeah, because that's not my kuleana. Yeah. And so if you cannot conform to that particular thing, because that's the crux of this whole program, is that reconnectivity through, if you want to call it religion, you can call it religion. But you know, otherwise, you can learn this art form in other avenues. Yeah, there's places that you can learn just the technicality of the art form. The difference here is that you get the technical and then you get the spiritual, and you have to be able to plug into that because that's just how we do stuff.
Yeah, I agree. As a culture, you cannot have one without the other. We have that spiritual aspect with our cultural practices in everyday life, so we don't separate it, even in our language learning. We bring in chants, we open up with chants, we close with chants. It's just who we are as people.
Mahalo. And so the next question, there was a lot of questions, but I'm gonna sort of distill it down for everybody. So could you both maybe just share again quickly what age ranges your programs serve? And if you've been perhaps approached by any school or institution looking to integrate your approach?
Okay, I'll go first. You know, primarily our target audience are adults, you know, who have completed high school. I do have a few students who are 18 and the youngest 16, but the methodology is applicable for any age level. We haven't been approached to try to formalize this methodology, and I think I saw someone somewhere up here that yes, we really have decolonized the method of learning. We really went back old school and really looking at a more culturally appropriate way of teaching and learning, and just removing that whole, what I call the Western construct. And the reason why it's important for us to manipulate the rods is we're very kinesthetic and tactile learners. And by touching it and feeling it, we feel the power, the spiritual power of those things to help aid in our learning. And so all of these rods and manipulatives actually bring life to the language, and that's the spiritual component that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, I'm going to ditto on what Brada said, because we really are geared more so towards, for our students within the program, towards adult. We have a couple of them who are 16, 17 years old. And part of the reason why we didn't open it up to younger is because at that particular age, you know, first, I don't teach children because I don't have that kind of patience. I usually chew them up and spit them out and then, you know, go cry over there. But but also too, you know, the parents have to be on board with what we are practicing. Yeah, and especially the ceremonial and ritual aspects. And so what we do is we encourage those students who are within the program to bring their families, to bring their children. if they see fit. And so that way, the matriculation from what the parent is doing, it goes into the keiki in real time as they're learning. And I tend to agree with Keoua in the sense that adults, and especially young adults who are parents, tend to don't have a lot of programs for them. Yeah, I call them the missing generation, because they're too young, get plenty stuff for the kids. And then there's kupuna programs, but there's nothing in between, or not much in between. And we got to support that particular generation so that they can provide example to the kids that they have. So I hope that answers your question.
Mahalo. And actually, I have a question that I would like you both to reflect on. What are the ways in your programs that encourage your students to excel language-wise? Like, halal things, right? Just some context for everyone else. When we have to chant to be asked to let in, there is no automatic in. If you are left out in the cold, that means you have to do it again so those kind of innate halal things make us strive to be better. But I think it's good to kind of see, because there's one level, right? There's that one level of just language learning, but what in your programs requires or motivates your students to excel language-wise?
In our program, it's not just a one-way education. It's just not me speaking to you. It's very interactive and very immersive, and no one gets a break. Like, if we're learning a certain pattern, we all have to practice it. And it really goes to really connecting our brain, our ears, our eyes, and really opening up our mouth in practicing these patterns, and using the muscle memory to just focus on that. And then also, I have speakers who have gone through the immersion schools, so their level is much higher than the others, but they actually help the rest of the learners and participants throughout the day to practice and utilize it. So it's very important to have a community or a space where they can make mistakes and practice every day. I think that's what's important. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. For us, it's trying to inspire them. Can be challenging. Yeah, especially if number one, they already Olelo Hawaii. So how do we challenge that one, as opposed to the one that has no language fluency? And how do we make the two meet in the middle? Yeah. So I think when they see results of what they are doing, when they see the result of their chant, when they see the result that if they don't chant good, or if, you don't have to be the best chanter. Yeah. What I want is intention. What is your intention? And you have to be held accountable to what your intention is. And that intention carries forward personally. We all know that our kupuna were disciplined, they were focused, they were thinkers. Yeah. And so what we constantly try to build up that particular kind of thought process, that remember, your kupuna did this. How wonderful it is that you get to do what they did, that you become now the vessel of that ike that we can move forward. To me, that's incentive. That's major incentive, that you can do these things, and reconnect yourself. These tendrils of ike go back far into the pole, into the dark. Yeah, and it comes back to now, and then the tendril moves forward. And to me, that is the inspiration to do that.
Mahalo. And mahalo, everybody. We are almost at Kaukalaikalola, which is noon, right? There's a couple really quick questions. Are our language communities almost the same? Essentially, yes. We have there are some slight differences in how we learn our language, in various slight dialects, but for the most part, we all speak the same Hawaiian, essentially. And then there's one more. Somebody wants to know if chants are based on male and female roles.
That's you, Kealiʻi.
Yes, that's it's such a complex, it's a very complex subject that requires its own Zoom thing. But yes, some of it is a little bit more male oriented, some of it is a little bit more female oriented. But then how do we, because our relationship to our deities and to each other is different from our kupuna. Yeah, and so how do we bring that forward to be inclusive, but not not overstepping the boundaries? And that's a very interesting question. Yeah, and so there's certain things that I do personally that I don't teach to girls in the koko pupu'u kind of context, but I will teach females other parts of the koko pu'u process, and so that's my personal kind. So yeah, that's a hard question to answer in 30 seconds.
Well, mahalo. I'm gonna wrap this up. We do have a break before the next session, but I wanted to mahalo Keoua and Kealiʻi for sharing with us today. And mahalo to all of you. You two are very much in high demand. So in case Keoua put his email in the chat, Kumu, is there anywhere that people can find your contact info? There you go. That's your answer, everybody. Very busy man. But mahalo to everybody. Mahalo to our presenters. Mahalo. By all means, take your break and then find your next session. But mahalo for joining us.
All right, mahalo for having us.
Aloha, mahalo
Aloha.
nui. Thank you, brother.
Aloha, same to you.
Enoch from the north.